Hey, real quick before we start the podcast, if you have listened to more than one episode, can you do me a favor and rate and review the show? Now, I'm not big on asking for favors, but we really want to get this podcast listed in the top of all health and fitness podcasts, not just the fitness category. This will take you less than a minute, and if you could do that, that would make us friends forever. And since we refuse all sponsors on the show, this will be my only ask rather than telling you to go check out some supplement or product we don't actually believe in, like every other podcast out there. So please rate and review. Okay, that's it. To the podcast.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Jerred Moon here, and welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Just me today going over what a well-rounded training program actually looks like. So I'm going to make this very listener-friendly. So if you're listening to the podcast, you won't need to see my screen, but I will be sharing at least some of the overview, like template that we use for programming. And it's something I want to talk about. And here's how this came about. So over the last week, I had a couple of fitness professionals, people I know, people in the industry who wanted to start using Garage Gym Athlete programming, and they were like, can you share a little bit behind like the methodology and stuff? So I just took the next wave of programming that we have for the hard to kill track, which is what I program. I shared with them I just did like a screen share real quick of like, here's what it looks like. It wasn't more than a few minutes long, but I just showed them what we do and how we do it. And they were super impressed. And I think it gets lost on me sometimes, like what we have done and what we've created. If you attend the webinars, you're part of the Garage Gym Athlete community, you're probably really, very aware of what we're doing and how we're doing it. But I do think that some of that has been lost and we don't communicate it enough. And so that's what I want to do today. Shouldn't take very long, but this will be the podcast today. Want to go over it, make sure that everyone understands. Okay, so from a big picture, what do we do at Garage Gym Athlete? And it is concurrent training. And concurrent training is where you're blending, basically, let's just say strength and conditioning. You're doing some sort of strength work, and then you're also doing some sort of conditioning work. And you can split concurrent training a lot of different ways when that's the broad definition. You could say CrossFit by itself is a form of concurrent training. You could say the bodybuilder who does some cardio to cut is concurrent training. You could say a lot of athletic programs where athletes need to gain strength and they also need to get faster, they are doing concurrent training. There's a lot of different forms of concurrent training, and a lot of different ways you can do it. So it's not even really okay to just say, if someone's like, "Hey, what type of training do you do?" If that was a question that you got, you could say concurrent training and then just quickly explain how you're blending strength and conditioning, but it wouldn't even really cut to the point. Wouldn't really help someone understand what you do because it could be so broad. And I want to help you understand what we do and how different it is from anything else out there. Because I've also been in contact with athletes who, kind of want to do their own thing. They just want to go on like a bodybuilding split with some occasional running. So you have these two modalities, right? You're just trying to gain some mass and you're just doing some aerobic conditioning. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with any form of fitness. I just don't think that you should pursue any fitness that will get you injured, or is ultimately not advantageous to your health. Those are the only ones that are bad. And normally, if it's not advantageous to your health, it's where you're pushing to extremes, where they're extremely high intensity, or let's just talk like a power lifter who's just trying to gain mass with the worst diet possible, but mass moves mass, so they're doing that. Endurance athletes can go too far down a rabbit hole to where they're really just damaging their body more than they're helping their fitness. So that's what I'm talking about with some sort of fitness that's not advantageous to your health. It can go down a negative path, but that's not really anybody listening to this podcast. So it's not something that you guys need to worry about. Um, but when you are just doing two modalities, let's say uh, hypertrophy training, so trying to gain mass, and then you have one modality that's running, cycling, whatever, that's a fine program. and we can call it concurrent training, but it's still very different from what we do at Garage Gym Athlete. And it's just, we're not even in the same category. And I don't think that people truly understand it. And so let me go over exactly what we do. So this is part of the podcast where if you're looking on YouTube, I will share my screen with some of the things that we do and do program. All right. So how we do it I'm just going to take hard to kill. So what I have on my screen is a template from inside some of our company software, things that we use to program and do things. So there are a lot of different things that we do, and we do over the course of 30 days. So what we've done in concurrent training up until several years ago, we put together a theoretical template for the best concurrent training we could think of. And that is what the hard to kill track is. Our best guess on what we think concurrent training should look like to make someone incredibly well rounded in a lot of different aspects, not just the size of your biceps and your mile time. Those aren't the only two things that we're looking at. We're looking at a lot of different things, and it really plays out. The only people who truly understand the benefit of this are the athletes who stick to our programming for at least a couple cycles. You just realize you're in so much better shape because of the process that you are unknowingly following, which is our programming, but how much is going into it. Now, when I say how much is going into it, I don't have to sit around for 15 hours to create one wave of a cycle. It's actually fairly easy to me because of how systematic we've made it, and quite frankly, how much experience I have in doing it. I know how to progress things, how to add things, but when I'm making sure that I'm hitting my checklist, it makes it incredibly easy. And I'm going to walk you through a month here. So the first thing that we do, and I'm going to knock this off real fast, is we work on a major. So every wave, every cycle has its focus. We call that the major. And the real reason being here is because I think what has been discovered in CrossFit programming, however organized or unorganized, you find the CrossFit programming or stuff that you've seen, is that when there's not enough focus on one given modality, not enough progress is made in that area. And I think that's just, I think everybody knows that. It's not really something that people argue about anymore. It was one point in time, but that's just cold, hard facts. If you don't want to really get good at anything, then do just a little bit of stuff all around. So that's why we have a major in here where we focus on one thing, and the major can change. So there's not one particular major that would outweigh another. But if you wanted more of an endurance focus, you would have more of an endurance major. If you wanted more of a strength focus, you'd have more of a strength major. Just it's that simple. But there are also a lot of different areas you could take that. And what these major areas are is they have a certain allotted time that have to be hit on, like actual training minutes every single week. And there's 6 of them in a 4-week wave, with really over the course of 3 weeks, because our 4th week is deload body geometry, which I'll hit on at the end. But so it's basically two training sessions per week for 3 weeks is our major. And our major is what we are focusing on. So if that was strength, then we would make sure we're getting more than enough time in strength to be able to move forward. Okay, so that's the major, and that's a big part of programming. And this is where a lot of other programs stop. They'll have a major, then you throw in the running or cycling or whatever, and then boom, you have a concurrent training program. We're done. That's not where we stop. If you're looking at my screen, we're not even close. So next, we're going to be hopping into the strength continuum. So if from there, we have 4 things that we're going to make sure that we hit every single 4-week wave. So we have strength, speed, strength, and speed. And I'll briefly explain each one of these, but just so you know, this is what you're seeing in the programming. Again, every 3 weeks. The 4th week is body geometry. Every 3 weeks, you're going to see all of these things. So the frequency is still enough that you're going to see all these things, plus major A major over the course of 12 weeks is focusing very hard on one area to make sure that you see a lot of progress in the area that's kind of promised of that cycle. Okay, so strength is what you think it is. It's just working on strength, 1 rep max strength. Then we have strength speed, which an easier way to think about it is just think of um, like if the barbell was a heavy deadlift, strength speed would be a lighter deadlift moved more quickly, dynamically. So you have dynamic efforts in there, strength speed. That is strength speed. So a moderate load moved quickly. Then we have speed strength, which is kind of the inverse of that. So this could be a wall ball shot. This could be a kettlebell swing, something where you're more on the speed side, but there's resistance to the speed. Okay, resistance to the speed. And then speed is straight speed, and it's as you would think. So we're hitting on sprints, or maybe some sort of rotational movement, something that is just straight speed acceleration. Punching is a great way to go for speed. Sprinting, you could do even sledgehammer swings, things like that, and do do things for just the pure acceleration of the movement. And so we're hitting our major, then we're hitting across the strength continuum every 3 weeks to make sure you're seeing these things. And what we're doing here is, like, if we're trying to identify how we're different, or what our programming looks like compared to others, we are developing a very well-rounded human being, and a very athletic one. Because I think what athletes find, um, and this is what I've seen just anecdotally with friends who are kind of one dimensional, like my endurance friends or my strength friends, um, they start to lose a lot of their auxiliary stuff pretty fast as age comes, right? Like, it's just, if you're not constantly working on everything, you're going to start falling behind. And falling behind in what? It's like, I think just being a good human who can utilize their body and call upon your body when it's needed. And that's part of the reason why we call this the hard to kill track, is because originally it was really made for operators, people in the military, first responders, those kind of people. And now it's open to everyone and anyone, and we've seen a lot of success with everyone going through this kind of program. But it's just making you really well rounded. It's making you athletic. It's making you accessible. It's making your body more usable and with less injury. Now, the next continuum, some of these overlap, and that's not contradictory. Some of it's just how we actually program it, and is why things can be listed more than once. So next we have endurance. So we have muscle endurance, strength endurance, power endurance, and aerobic endurance. And this is just kind of what we call our aerobic, you know, continuum, like how we want to hit endurance in multiple different ways. Because yes, there is aerobic endurance, so starting at the end there, which we also train with energy systems. So aerobic endurance can be just like a long, slow run, right? So let's go run, and we'll hit our oxidative pathway, and we'll do 5 miles today, whatever. It could be that simple for aerobic endurance. But we hit aerobic, let's just say we hit the oxidative pathway or aerobic multiple times, at least 3 different times in 3 different ways over the course of 3 weeks. So you're never getting too little aerobic endurance. You're also not getting too much. So if you wanted to, specialize in one of these areas, that's why we have other tracks. The hard to kill track is the well-rounded track. This is like, I want to be able to run a 5K. I want to be able to lift a good amount of weight. I want to be able to, run, jump, throw, all those kind of things. The hard to kill track is where you want to be. And that's where I stay most of the time, just because that's what I want. I want to be well-rounded. So aerobic endurance, power endurance is where you're doing some sort of power-based movement. And you're doing it, let's just say over a longer timeline. So you could think kettlebell snatches done for 30 seconds, something like that, kettlebell cleans, anything that's power based, but not the 1 to 3 reps. It is building up a little bit more in the glycolytic pathway. Pretty uncomfortable stuff. Strength endurance, not much different. It could be like back squats for higher reps, higher loads. Muscle endurance, typically for us, is just going to be body weight stuff. So a lot of lunges, push-ups, body weight, anything that is going to help you maintain your muscular endurance without load, really, per our definition. Next, we have gain, pain, sustain. So this is where we're hitting uh, the three different energy systems. And so I've talked a lot about energy systems on the podcast, so I won't explain a lot here, but basically you have low end, middle tier, and then high end duration. So alactic is going to be without oxygen, 10, 15, 20 seconds, something like that. A lot of times you can gain benefit from this just doing it with strength training. We also train it independently, like on, short sprints, things like that. Glycolytic is longer duration. So we're talking about a minute, minute and a half, 2 minutes, something like that. These really suck. That's why I call them pain. They're just awful intervals, long rest duration in between. And then the oxidative pathway, this would be the second time it's hit that I've mentioned already. And this is going to be for us how we kind of differentiate. Hey, when am I programming aerobic endurance and when am I programming oxidative, like energy system training? Typically, when we have work to rest ratios involved, we're more thinking like we're targeting an energy system. So if we're doing like 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off, we're in the oxidative energy system training pathway. Like that's what we're doing. We're trying to get let's get sustainable, repeatable efforts. If we're in aerobic endurance, we might just say, hey, zone 2, 30 minutes, something like that. And that's how we differentiate. This is not like none of this came from some programming textbook, from the National Strength and Conditioning Association. Like we created all of this. So if how we do it doesn't jive with something you read, we don't really care. This is how we do it and how it's been programmed, how we've been programming it for a long time. Next, we have mixed modal aerobic and mixed modal anaerobic. So of everything we've talked about, none of it has been mixed modality so far. What is mixed modality? Mixed modality is what you would think of in CrossFit. So this is where you combine like a body weight movement with a barbell movement and a monostructural movement. So if we're doing, pull-ups, thrusters, and double unders as our workout, and we're doing that in rounds or whatever, yeah, that's similar to CrossFit. We might also program something similar. How we would be different is we would probably have work to rest ratios in there, or at least rest built in to the repeated efforts, so you can sustain and repeat and actually get better at those efforts. But that's it. Like as far as CrossFit, if we ever get compared to CrossFit, I think it's really funny because it's like, okay, well, here are the 2 times over the course of an entire 30 days where we do anything that resembles CrossFit. And I do think that mixed modality training is good for life in general, because a lot of life is mixed modality. Like you're having to do different things, but it doesn't mean like that's the only thing that we're doing and that we're going to be doing every single day. Just not how we're going to do it. Now, the last thing that we hit, and this can be weekly, it depends on how we're breaking down the daily, which I'll get into in just a second. The Z lift for us is just kind of it's like a made up category. Originally, it stood for Zercher. So Zercher lifts, if you are familiar, it's like where you're holding a barbell in the crooks of your elbow. You could do like Zercher walks, Zercher squats, very uncomfortable. But these for us it's the Z category. So this is where we get into a lot of stabilization stuff. So this could be walking with kettlebells held by bands, or, briefcase, suitcase deadlifts, things like that, farmer's carries, lunges, overhead kettlebell walking lunges, these kind of things where we're getting a little bit more stability involved, unilateral movements, a lot of the stuff that can get lost if you just don't have it checklist into your program. Okay, so from there, where do we go? And you'll see the rest of everything I have here. The daily is hit every single day. This is typically abdominal, core work, lower back, those kind of things we're going to be hitting pretty much every day. This can be through isometric contraction. This could be through just repetitions, whatever it is. And then we have 2 rest days built in per week. And then we deload in the 4th week. Now, I mentioned I would hit on body geometry. That's not listed on here because what we do, we have 12-week cycles. Each 12-week cycles has a 4-week wave. Of the 4-week wave, 3 weeks is what I just covered. So our basic hard to kill template and what we hit on. And that is what a well-rounded program looks like. The 4th week, we do deload, and deload is body geometry. And this is where we are balancing out planes of movement and muscle contraction types. And this is where sometimes it can get really taken for granted how much in the weeds we've done. But now that we have this system in this program, our athletes, we feel from a movement perspective, are really taken care of, because what we've hit are all these different areas, from kind of like a strength, endurance, you know, energy system, conditioning, like all of those areas are taken care of. But then what can be overlooked if you focus too much on that stuff is, am I getting enough different types of muscle contractions here? And am I getting in enough different different planes of movement? Am I having enough planes of movement to make sure that I'm not getting too one dimensional, to where, again, when you pursue too far down one dimension, injury can come. So it's kind of like our injury prevention week. And anyone who's done a body geometry deload week with us, we almost need to stop calling them deload weeks. They deload you from the previous 3 weeks of ramp up that has been programmed, but they are not easy. They've never been programmed as easy. None of our deload weeks are easy. They are just different. Like, there are different weeks, and they really help you do all the things that I mentioned. So planes of movement, muscle contractions, and then we also hit a lot of zone 2 in these weeks, to make sure that the athletes are still building one of the most foundational elements that you need. It doesn't matter if you're trying to build muscle. It doesn't matter if you're trying to get faster. It doesn't matter what you are trying to do. Low intensity aerobic work is 100% necessary. And so that is what we are doing at Garage Gym Athlete. That is our programming. And now all of our other tracks follow a very similar model. Where it's different is, I mentioned at the beginning, we have a major, right? All the other tracks have a major, and then they have a minor. So they have a major that they have to focus on a certain amount of time per week. And then they also have a minor that they have to focus on a certain amount of time per week. Hard to kill track does not have that. There is no minor. The minor is being well rounded. And I'm not trying to sell you on the hard to kill track. It's just their difference, a big difference between the programs. So the endure track is more endurance based, and it's still concurrent training. The strength track is more strength based, and it's still concurrent training. Hard to kill, in my opinion, is the best attempt at having the most well-rounded concurrent training program on the planet Earth, with everything that we have theoretically programmed. So the reason I call it theoretical is because, again, this template was not uh, pulled from anywhere. I definitely think that we are standing on the shoulders of giants, people who have put in the work, done the research, found out what did work, didn't work with athletes. So now, I'm not trying to say we invented all of these things and these areas of training and all this other stuff. Like we are standing on the shoulders of giants, and we are very lucky and fortunate to be in this position. But it was theoretical when we first started, because when we first started and this was the template, we didn't really know what the results would be. It's like, well, are we focusing enough if we're hitting aerobic once a week over 3 weeks in these different modalities? Is that enough to still maintain and make progress? Same with strength training. Like, is there enough here? And if we're hitting it in different ways, will athletes still progress? Because no one else was doing it when we started. And to be honest, if you look at other programs, no one else is, they're still not doing it. The only real programs out there that are out there today that are come anywhere close um, are ones that are doing concurrent training. But then even within concurrent training, they're not touching any of the areas that we're talking about. They just happen to also be doing concurrent training. They're combining the two, and maybe you like that, maybe you don't. But this is why I legitimately think that we are the best, and why I think our athletes should get excited about the next wave that we have coming up, and that launches this week. So it's going to follow that exact template that I just showed you. So as you know, every 4 weeks, a new cycle, a new wave kicks off. We're still right here at the beginning of the year. Our last wave, the first wave, especially for the hard to kill track, was more of a base wave. Some of you enjoyed it, some of you did not, and that's to be expected with a base wave. And now we're hopping into our more concrete, hard to kill traditional, following that exact template that I just went over. So all of our current athletes, get excited about what's coming, and just stick to the model, stick to the process. and you will see a lot of results. Anyone who's looking to get started, go to garagegymathlete.com if you want to see what this looks like, programmed down to sets, reps, all those kind of things. Because where this gets nuanced from a coach standpoint and programmer is I still have to factor in, are we hitting too many movements in the same week? Are we getting enough push? Are we getting enough pull? Are we getting enough lower body? Those basic things are still taken into account and consideration when we are programming, especially when I'm programming the hard to kill track. I have to look at those things and make sure they're all balanced and put together well for the athletes before the programming goes out. But those are all the things that we are doing. We are not influencers posting whatever the hell we felt like doing yesterday. We are not doing random workouts thrown together. We are not focusing on one area too much at the detriment to every other area that's possible. We are doing what's really hard for most other people to do, but we have an amazing template around it, an amazing team. And I think that, we are the best programming out there. So hopefully you found that this helpful. Whether you want to follow along with us or not, you have the basic template to program it yourself after, either listening to or watching this. Either way, knock yourself out, test out the methodology and see how it works for you. But that's all I got for today. For all of our athletes who are around in the community, a lot of great things coming this year and looking forward to working with you guys more. If anyone does want to get started, go to garagegymathlete.com. And remember, if you don't kill comfort, comfort will kill you.
Athlete Podcast. If you want to learn more, go to garagegymathlete.com. You can learn about our training. Let us send you a copy of our book, The Garage Gym Athlete, or you can even get featured on the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. Thanks for listening.